Good morning, Africa. Good morning to the rest of the world. It's another episode of the conversation here on TOS TV, your digital first Pan-African news network. And guess what? It's the first day of February. We eventually got through the long days of January. Isn't that amazing? I am Samuel Asimi.
And I am Cameron John.
Okay, moving on, we're going to go on a quick break, and when we get back, it's the time to take you through happenings and development across the African continent.
Thanks for staying with us. It's still the conversation, and if you just joined us, well, happy new month. We're going straight into developments across Africa, where participants at Libya's United Nations sponsored peace talks have approved a list of candidates seeking to lead a transitional government that will prepare the North African state for a national election at the end of 2021. Now, the transitional government will oversee preparations for the vote that aims to end decades of chaos and conflict that has left Libya split down the middle and hammered its vital oil exports on which the country's economy depends. The 75 participants at talks in Switzerland, ranging from regional and tribal figures to representatives of political factions, will vote next week to pick a 3-person presidential council and a prime minister. They will pick from 24 candidates for the 3 presidential council posts, while 21 people are vying for the post of prime minister, according to the United Nations list released on Saturday. Now, while the United Nations-backed talks have progressed, many Libyans fear competition for posts could yet trigger fresh fighting, unraveling a ceasefire that has largely held since the month of October in 2020.
Okay, moving on to Tunisia, where several hundred young people have taken to the streets of Tunis to protest perceived government corruption and police repression. Now, they also demanded the release of Sons of the Nation in reference to over 1,000 people arrested during several nights of demonstration, leading to violent clashes in mid-January. Now, a series of rallies which coincided with the 10th anniversary of the revolution that brought down the Zain El Abidine Ben Ali on January 14, 2011, after 23 years in power. The youth marched from Human Rights Square in central Tunis to Habib Bourguiba Avenue with the aim of reaching the Interior Ministry, but were blocked by deployed security forces. Now, Tunisia finds itself amidst a political and economic crisis, a compounding political and economic crisis there in Tunisia.
And more developments, this time going to developments relating to COVID-19 across Africa. After an almost 10-month stall from classes, talking about schools in Ghana, the initial joy of going back to school for many students in Ghana has since turned into a nightmare as the far-reaching impact of COVID-19 pandemic has put over 222 private schools out of business as economic challenges led to many proprietors to convert their facilities into residential apartments, hostels, and guest houses, leaving over 40,000 students and 3,496 teachers in academic limbo. Now, an added complication to an already complex situation for Ghana's still developing educational infrastructure, the head teacher of Asamag International School, NS Aya Tauge, has not been having any easy time. He is quoted as saying, and I quote, "I have 4 children, 3 are in school. For them to go to school, I have to consult a friend and to help me a little."
That is quite interesting. Still on the issue of COVID-19, we'll move over to Kenya, where over 1.25 million frontline health workers are set to receive the COVID-19 jab between February and June. Now, Dr. Mercy Mwangangi, the Chief Administrative Secretary for Health, said the program will be divided into 3 phases, with the first giving priority to healthcare workers, security and immigration officers. Then she explained further that so far Kenya, with a population of 48.5 million people, was expecting to get 24 million doses via the World Health Organization-backed COVAX scheme. Now, the country will procure an additional 11 million doses from other mechanisms to vaccinate nearly 16 million people over a period of 18 months. That's a statement by the senior health official, while talking to journalists in the country.
Well, with that, we go to our COVID-19 updates. Let's see what the figures look like. All right, welcome back. Thanks for being with us. This is The Conversation, and this is the part of the show where we jump on what's happening on the front pages of the national dailies across Nigeria. And we've got quite a few this morning. I'm starting with the Punch newspaper, one of my favorite newspapers, I must say, and looking very colorful as always, and loads of interesting stories on the front page of the Punch. Let's start from the very top, just slightly over the picture of Mr. President. You have external reserves hit 36.39 billion US dollars or on improved crude oil price. That's an indication that maybe, just maybe, the prediction of the Buhari-led administration that Nigeria will be coming out of recession on or before the end of the first quarter seems to be on the right path. External reserves hit 36.39 billion US dollars. Now, right under that, you can see Mr. President's photo, and it says experts, nurses differ as presidency warns of fresh lockdown. Now, this has been hovering for almost a month now. It's been back and forth. The PTF will come out and say, well, it's on the table, but a decision has not been taken. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if some of the other dailies will carry headlines saying Mr. President wants lockdown and tells Nigerians to wear face masks.
Exactly.
Don't forget, it is now an offense for you not to wear a face mask in public and in public gatherings, in government buildings and government areas. So, it's always better to follow the law, keep the law. Okay, looking at other developments, Buhari fails to summon police council meeting. IG's tenure ends today.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. The Inspector General of Police, Muhammad Adamu, his tenure ends today, but we are being reminded that Mr. President has not called a police council meeting. And following that, you have 49.68 billion naira spent on pipeline repairs in 10 months. This is according to the Group Managing Director of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, NNPC. Now, let's go to the major headline. It's got about 3 riders underneath it. Gaping headline in the center of the Punch. States fail to make vaccine plans. Federal government blames politics for the delay. Under that, you have the riders. It is the responsibility of federal government to provide vaccines for states, says the Kano state government. Politics and logistics due to not fault Nigeria. Causing delay. That's what the federal government is saying. And then finally, MTN donates 25 million US dollars for 7 million close
doses.
Close for Nigeria and others. Yeah. Okay, so that's how it's looking on the Punch. Several other interesting stories. So if you want to get the meat of it, get yourself a copy of the Punch.
Okay, we'll move over to the Daily Trust, and I'm going to start with something related to, what John earlier said about the Adamu, the police chief, the police boss's tenure ending today. The very obvious headline on the Daily Trust this morning says, as IGP Adamu retires today, Buhari to appoint new police boss. And then the writers under that say, extension unlikely as Adamu stays put. His time is up, presidency official. And then the third one says, what president should do? That's coming from Afenifere, ACF, and then the CSOs. Now, moving over to similar issue that was on the Punch newspaper this morning with regards to COVID-19 lockdown and stuff. COVID-19 presidency warns of second lockdown. And this one says Daily Trust appoints editors and orders. And then former President Olusegun Obasanjo is saying, why I presented Yaradua despite kidney transplant. Why he presented Yaradua to us Nigerians as president candidate despite kidney transplant. So if you want to, get all of that story and then the juice on that, you should get yourself a copy of the Daily Trust newspaper.
All right, let's look at what's happening on the national economy. Very formal newspaper, I must say. We start with the topmost story. SON, that Standards Organization of Nigeria, raises alarm over under dispensing of oxygen by plant owners. Don't forget, as the second wave hit, especially in Nigeria and Lagos to be precise, where it is the epicenter, oxygen has become essential.
Yes.
And we were also told that Nigerians require the highest quality, which is the most expensive oxygen. So that story, if you want to get the details of that, get yourself a copy of the National Economy. Major headline, center of the newspaper: Finch foresees growth potential for Islamic banking in Nigeria. Yes, quite positive indicators there. And yes, we have exceptional auditor at First Bank Nigeria Insurance, celebrating Blessing Ibieze, right there on the national economy.
Okay, moving over to the leadership newspaper this morning, and this kind of just seals what you said about the way some other newspaper will put the face mask and lockdown thing. This one says, that's a very gaping headline, says presidency to Nigerians: wear face mask or risk another lockdown.
Exactly.
You did say that.
Yeah.
And then the writers under that, I think we have about 4 writers, and the first one said decries non-compliance with executive order. Lead by example, PDP tells President Muhammadu Buhari. And the other one says, Osun records 5 cases of UK variant of COVID-19. And now that is scary. And then World Health Organization visit Wuhan market where coronavirus was first detected. I think that is in line with trying to see how they can solve the problem of coronavirus.
Yeah, you have a WHO team currently in China. It's a whole lot of back and forth.
Okay, another headline on there says IMF projects improved capital spending for Nigeria in 2021, and the writer under that says stock market investors gain 1.13 trillion naira in 1 month. Get yourself a copy of the leadership newspaper this morning. Quite interesting stories to read.
Yeah, and finally, it's my most favorite newspaper.
Of course.
Business Day. Interesting developments on Business Day this morning. Gaping headline: beyond tolls, Nigeria needs a sustainable road fund.
Yes.
Interesting story. I think you should get a meat of this. Nigerians should be interested in the state of the roads. Now, if you haven't heard, toll gates will return to most federal roads across the country. The government is looking for every avenue to generate funds, especially as to be able to fund the 2021 budget. And just before we go from the Business Day, thirst for Nigeria oil fades as exploration drops. So you can now understand why the government has to be ingenious in terms of generating revenue to run the country's budget. That's what it's looking like, or as far as the newspaper review segment of today's edition of The Conversation is concerned. Remember, if you are interested in any of the stories, just get yourself a copy of any of the national dailies. So we'll take a quick breather, some special reports, and when we come back, it will be time for our big story.
North to South Africa, East to West Africa, TOS TV Network is your digital-first Pan-African news network, bringing you news from across the continent. Visit our website www.tostvnetwork.com and follow us on social media at TOS TV Network on Instagram.
Born into an Orthodox Jewish family who emigrated from Russia to the United States in the 1930s, Lawrence Harvey Ziegler, popularly called Larry King, was born in Brooklyn, New York City on November 19, 1933. Losing his father to a heart attack at the age of 9 resulted in King, his mother and only sibling, his brother, going on government welfare. After a series of setbacks in life, King gained his first job in radio in Miami, Florida. The manager of a small radio station hired him to clean up and perform miscellaneous tasks. When one of the station's announcers abruptly quit, King was made an immediate replacement. His first broadcast was on May 1, 1957. Shortly before he went on air, Larry chose the surname King, which he got from an advertisement in the Miami Herald for King's Wholesale Liquor, because, according to his general manager, Ziegler was too difficult to remember. Within 2 years, he legally changed his name to Larry King, which became a trademark till his death. He featured in lots of radio and TV shows till 30th January 1978, when he introduced his own show, The Larry King Show. In June 1985, Larry King Live began on CNN. On CNN, Larry King Live was the longest-running television show hosted by the same person on the same network and in the same time slot, and was recognized for it by the Guinness Book of World Records. He retired in 2010 after tapping 6,000 episodes of the show. The uniqueness of his show was his direct and non-confrontational approach to his interviews, of which he did over 60,000 interviews. In March 2012, King co-founded Aura TV with a Mexican business tycoon, Carlos Slim, where he hosted his own show, Larry King Now. In May 2013, the Russian-owned RT American network announced that they struck a deal with Aura TV to host the Larry King Now show on its network. This stirred up controversies in America. King remained active as a writer and television personality. With a profile like King's, he received many honorary and broadcast awards, too numerous to mention. Married 8 times to 7 different women, King had 5 children and 9 grandchildren, as well as 4 great-grandchildren. His actions as a philanthropist cannot be ignored. In 1987, King survived a major heart attack, which led to the founding of the Larry King Cardiac Foundation, a non-profit organization that paid for life-saving cardiac procedures for people who otherwise would not be able to afford them. In September 2017, King stated that he had no intention of ever retiring and expected to host his programs until he died. And so it was till 23rd January 2021.
Kobe Bryant, the son of former NBA player Joe Bryant, walked same path as his father. He was an American professional basketball player who spent his entire 20 years career with the Los Angeles Lakers in the National Basketball Association. The Black Mamba was indeed a shining star amongst his team. Bryant was instrumental to the growth of basketball in Africa.
The reason why I picked up a basketball in the first place was because of Kobe.
He was an image so many young Africans looked up to. While attending the FIFA World Cup in South Africa in 2010, Bryant expressed his excitement over visiting Africa and being a role model to young Africans. He encouraged young Africans to believe in themselves and their dreams and continue to stay focused.
This is amazing to me, because I never would have thought in a million years that playing the game of basketball would bring me to Soweto to talk to soccer kids about life and about having a dream. No matter whether you're a football player, whether you're a basketball player, whether you're a tennis player, the message is the same. If you want to achieve something, if you want to be great at it or good at it, you have to work hard, you have to believe in yourself, and most importantly, you have to love what you do.
Bryant died at age 41, along with his 13-year-old daughter, Gianna, and 7 others in a helicopter crash in Calabasas, California on 26 January 2020.
Welcome back. It's still the conversation here on TOS TV, your digital first Pan-African network. And if you're just joining, you haven't missed so much because we're about to get into the crux of the conversation. That is the big story. And now the conversation this morning is centered around the reports by Transparency International. It was released last week on Corruption Perception Index for 2020, and Nigeria ranked number 149 of 183, sliding 13 places in the ranking. Now, an anti-corruption group, the Civil Society Legislative Advocacy Center, that is CISLAC, described Nigeria's poor ranking in the newly released 2020 Corruption Perception Index of Transparency International as worrisome. And then CISLAC, a Nigerian partner of Transparency International, identified factors suspected to be responsible for the country's poor performance, to include lack of transparency in COVID-19 response, nepotism, and lack of adequate laws to tackle corruption. Now, in a statement signed by the executive director of CISLAC, Awal Musa, the group also identified the prevalence of bribery and extortion by the police and corruption in the security sector as other probable causes of the poor ranking. Now, in the report released, Nigeria scored 25 out of 100 points, where 0 is highly corrupt and 100 is the highest possible score. Very clean. Nigeria's 25 points fell short by 1 point compared to its 2019 record. Now, the country also dropped by 3 places from its 146th position in 2019 to 149 out of the 180 countries surveyed. According to the CPI report, Nigeria is ranked the second most perceived corrupt West African country after Guinea-Bissau, which ranked 165. Now, with us in the studio to discuss that is Samuel Asimi, Program Officer, Anti-Corruption with Transparency International Nigeria, Civil Society Legislative Advocacy Center, CISLAC, here in Abuja. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, Samuel, first of all, let's get your reaction to when that report came out by Transparency International. I know naturally most Nigerians would have expected that after the 2019 report, Nigeria should have at least moved up the scale. But we went back, and as it stands, we seem to be the most corrupt African nation.
Second most corrupt in West Africa.
Yes, it's quite interesting, and it's also very sad. When we saw the figures and the scores, it was really not a nice sight. I think this is just a testament to the fact that the efforts being put into the anti-corruption campaign is not commensurate with the results. So we have lots of lip service, we have lots of talk, we have of course, the whole change begins with me and lots of efforts. But when you look at the results are actually not reflecting the efforts being put in there. Okay. So I think it's time for the government at all levels, and it's important to stress this, not just the federal, but at the state levels, to actually entrench transparency. So they just leave it to the federal alone, and also for other arms of government, like the judiciary, and of course the National Assembly, to join the presidency and the executive to push for this anti-corruption effort. It's also nice for the government to understand that this report is actually an assessment of the government's performance so far. So instead of maybe bashing the reports, or instead of looking at it as maybe we are unpatriotic citizens as we are being labeled in different corners, it should just be a point for self-reflection and look at the weaknesses and strengths so that the government can see areas they can actually buckle up in the anti-corruption efforts.
Now, the government has come out to say they disagree
Yes.
with the yardsticks
Yes.
that Transparency International has used to come out with this report. In fact, the government has even pointed out areas where it believes it had achieved a lot of success in its anti-corruption fight. How do we find the balance in between this, what Transparency International is saying in terms of the CPI report, and what the government is saying, look, we're fighting corruption and we can give you results?
Yes, we get this each year when the result is not favorable. And when the result is favorable, of course, we get maybe accolades and the government ride with it. So successive governments, the current government, when they were in the opposition, they loved the results, the CPI index. They used it against the previous government, and now they are here. We also hear this thing. So it's a normal scenario, and we are used to it. Looking at the CPI itself, so the CPI is a composite data. It takes aggregates data from about 8 different sources. You look at the World Bank is in there, the Bertelsmann Foundation Transformation Index, the World Economics Forum Survey, look at the World Justice and Rule of Law Project, and on, and a couple of other surveys and reports. So we pick reports, we pick indices from this and indicators from these 8 sources that speak to administrative and political corruption. So once we get these indices from these credible sources, we now actually standardize them and get the average of each of them. So we'll come up with this index. The methodology is open. We've engaged the government at different levels on how this methodology works, and we've told them it's open there, you can check it out and you can challenge it. The European Commission Joint Research Center actually audited this stat survey, this methodology Transparency International uses. It was done in 2012. It was done in 2017, and they found it to be statistically coherent and well balanced. So this is what we use for this methodology, and we're actually open to engage the government in it. Now look at the matter itself. If you look at the issues at hand, you're Nigerians as I am, like we are witnesses to what happened. Late last year we had the NSAS issue. That was young citizens being pushed by extortion amongst the police officers. You saw what happened. That changes the perception of corruption in the country, I tell you for free. A second option, we saw what happened to the suspended acting chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. It's not in our place to say if he's guilty or not. No. You see the theorics around it, you see how he was suspended and everything. What do you think that will actually pass out as a perception of corruption to someone, a business expert who's actually working in Nigeria or a company executive? That's also a wrong signal to corruption perception. You look at the asset recovery. We have multiple agencies recovering assets. Kudos to this government. They've tried in recovering assets. So you have the ICPC recovering, you have the EFCC, you have the Customs, you have the Code of Conduct Bureau, you have the police, you have the NDLEA. Now you ask them a simple question. Where can I see the total number of assets recovered?
And what has been done with it?
Good. You can't actually have that because each of them recover these assets and manage them independently. We don't have a policy. We don't have a central framework for it. And if you look at one of the allegations against Mr. Magu, it's actually that he actually mismanaged these assets and he was being accused of reselling these assets. Once again, it's not in our place to point out if he was wrong or right. We'll leave that for the rule books. But what we are saying is if this policy is in place, this wouldn't have happened. And the perception, the wrong perception of corruption in the country wouldn't also be there. So with this point, you see, it's clear that, of course, the ranking and the rating is not out of place. Normal citizens, you could sample opinion on the streets, ask citizens how far. Another one, maybe before your next question, will be the issue around the palliatives. You could look at it. We saw what happened during the sharing of this palliative, so-called palliative, given by donors, international partner, business executive, and of course the government. You saw how these palliatives were distributed. At some point, they were stocked in warehouses. At some point, we had young people breaking, very, very sad. We had people breaking in. At some point, we had party members, politicians, using this as souvenirs to party stalwarts. Well labeled COVID intervention, COVID, and they were giving this out to party stalwarts. That's an abuse of power for personal gain, and that's corruption. So when you look at all this, definitely you'd see these things actually reflect, because they're out there in the news, and whoever has been looking at it, these 8 credible sources have given you, wherever they are interviewing to get their indicators, then definitely this would speak against the perception of corruption in the country.
All right.
Okay, earlier you spoke about, because while analyzing, you spoke about the efforts of the government, of this current government, this current administration in tackling, corruption issues as relates to, asset recovery and stuff like that. And I know that this government, the President Buhari administration government, is big on corruption. The economy actually rides on the issue of anti-corruption, fighting corruption. And I think that is why the government has come out to say, no, we don't agree, because we have been putting effort and we have been seeing results. So where would you now say that, where's the discrepancy in all of this? Where would you say is the discrepancy? Where do we not have the balance?
Yeah, I thank you for flagging that out. Anti-corruption was at the forefront of the agenda of the president when he was running at both times. Of course, he was the anti-corruption champion, and I think that's actually why we really believe he would actually take a second look at the scores, the indices, and see how to make this better. And that's one area CISLAC is actually open to work with the government, the anti-graft agencies. We already even work with them at the level of Transparency International and CISLAC, and we are open to working with them. Looking at the areas, one, we need good legal frameworks, existing legal frameworks, like a Proceeds of Crime Management Act or a Proceeds of Crime Bill that would actually provide a structure for managing recovered assets, which is one of the areas I pointed. You see, we have Abacha loot. We are getting different types coming. $321 million we got from the Swiss not long ago. We still got another from the US, which is to be put into road construction at different areas. Why do you think we have these funds coming at different level, conditional cash transfer? We also have more funds which are outside there, but there's actually a deep distrust between those people. So they're like, what assurances do you have that if we actually return these funds, they won't be reluted?
Exactly.
So once we have a framework to look at proceeds of crime, not just the international recovered assets, domestically, if you look around, you drive around, you see buildings saying keep off under EFCC, keep off under EFCC. Those structures are left out there to decay. So as a managing recovered assets, we know what we call interim forfeiture and final forfeiture. So once you seize an asset, once it's in court, it's actually under interim forfeiture. So the person is still contesting it, and the person could get a judgment for or against. Now within that framework, we know how court cases linger. That asset is actually deteriorating because there's no framework to manage it. But in senior crimes, where there is a framework to manage these assets, so you find there is actually a policy to follow. This asset still runs. If it's a hotel, allow it to continue. It works on, it pays tax to the government. People who are employed continue doing their jobs and continue getting paid. The economy is booming until the final forfeiture. Once that happens, we know which agency is managing it, not lots of agencies managing it. It creates coordination, and it actually boosts the fight against corruption, because these are times where we have scarce resources, and those resources will be in place. That's just one. Looking around the place, the federal government passed the Police Act 2020. It's a beautiful one. Transparency International actually pushed for it at different levels. It's a nice one. The police has a unit, the complaints response unit. They receive complaints through social media and different platforms. The CRU is actually a very nice innovation. Kudos to the police. Currently, they're just in Abuja, the Federal Capital Territory. But the Police Act gives them the power to actually be domiciled in other states, 36 states across the Federation and the FCT. If that act is fully implemented, we could have this. That's another step. With beneficial ownership register, we have lots of times we've heard the government say they're going to create a beneficial ownership register. That's to register for those who have shares, maybe in different companies, to know these guys so they don't sit on the board that actually still offer contracts to these same companies. We've had different times since 2016. We've had different people say they're going to have, from this government, say they're going to have a central database register. We're past the CAMA, that's the Company and Allied Matters Act, which needs to have this, but we've not seen its function.
All right, just hold that thought.
Yes,
we'll take a quick break, and when we return, I'm interested because we did talk about policy.
Yeah.
So when we got back, I want to ask you a question around policy. Do stay with us.
Thank you.
Thanks for staying with us. It's still the conversation, and it is the big story. We are looking at the recently released report by Transparency International that has placed Nigeria in a very, very precarious situation in terms of its fight against corruption. And we have with us in the studio Samuel Asimi, Program Officer Anti-Corruption with Transparency International Nigeria, Civil Society Legislative Advocacy Center, CISLAC, based in Abuja, Nigeria's capital city. And just before we went on that break, he was giving us insight into policy strategies that have been put in place both by Transparency International, civil society groups and pressure groups, just to be able to build a system that makes government accountable to the people. But you did talk earlier about policy. Is the problem having the policy, or is the challenge in implementing the policy? Which exactly is Nigeria faced with as we speak?
I think it's both ways. It's both ways because in some points, like I mentioned, the proceeds of crime, we don't have a policy. And in some points, like the Police Act and the rest, we have the policy, but it's not being implemented. So it's both ways, and it's interesting. We as civil society organizations, the best we can do is just to support the government. Government is the one who has power to actually effect these changes. So in that policy you could look around the whistleblower policy, like a legislation, not even just a policy now. What we have is a policy run by the Ministry of Finance, which looks at, of course, if you blow a whistle on maybe some cash stashed somewhere, you get a percentage, but that ends there. What we would like the government to actually have is a proper whistleblower law that actually cuts across all facets of agencies and the society. So this is not just for you looking for money somewhere and coming to get 5%, 2.5%, or how many percent of it. Now, this is actually one that actually looks at protection for whistleblowers. Maybe you're trying to change your name. Of course, we know resources are hard and the government purse is lean, but then we could cut costs in some areas and see how this would be and this would happen. So people are encouraged to blow the whistle. They won't just blow the whistle. They know after blowing the whistle, they would actually get witness protection and other kind of things. Not where someone blows the whistle and for him to even get his reward, they're actually trying to psychologically evaluate and assess him. I mean, he risked his life to blow that whistle, and you're saying you can't give him the money because you're not sure if he's really sound. I think that in itself is an issue. So we really need to have a policy, legislation. So that's where National Assembly comes in, because there are lots of legislations that should be passed so they can speedily deliberate on these issues and pass them, and the president should also assent to these legislations with the best interests of Nigerians at heart.
Okay. All right. Now, the Minister of Information, Alhaji Lai Mohammed, said, and I quote, "For instance, following the release of the 2019 Transparency International Corruption Perception Index, the government initiated reforms to improve on Nigeria's ease of doing business indices. This is because we found that up to 40% of the country's corruption perception survey indices relate to business processes and general public service delivery processes. Government's swift action has led to major reforms in the processes at our ports and business process points." Now, the question is, why did the CPI did not capture this in the 2020 report?
The CPI looks at indicators and indices across the whole wide areas. Look at bribery, look at nepotism, which is abuse of power, look at rule of law, look at red tape indexes, lots of them, about 10 and a couple of them. So each of these different areas have indices they measure. Fine, the Minister of Information can say some efforts have been done in some areas, but now we have lots of indices as well. You could say you made improvements there, but there are also areas where declines also were noticed and occurred, like the ones I've mentioned before. I mean, let alone just having the head of your lead anti-graft agency being suspended in that manner. is also an issue, and that's also sent the wrong perception.
Wrong signals.
Yes, so while we are looking at the perception and while we are having this engagement and this discussion, it's also important to note that the government can say it's doing its work around the ease of business, and they've even promised to actually issue out a report. A few days ago, we had the presidency saying the Technical Unit for Governance and Anti-Corruption Reform, TUGA, would issue out a report on that. Now we are hearing the Minister of Information saying they'll issue out a report on that. This is beautiful. We expect their reports. We expect them to issue it out, and we'll be happy to actually engage them further and show them the areas of weaknesses and strengths. So it's not us, we are patriotic citizens, so we are not trying to fight the government, not at all. We're just showing the government a complete and actually factual empirical assessment of its efforts in the past year in anti-corruption. And these sources are actually out there in the public. The government can check it. We are open to engaging with them on these areas.
Okay, well, quickly before we wrap up this segment, I'm going to quote something that the chairman of Transparency International said about COVID-19. He said COVID-19 is not just a health and economic crisis, it's a corruption crisis, one that we're currently failing to manage. Now, what would be your call to action or call for action as regard to managing COVID-19 in Nigeria?
Yes, that quote by Delia, it's actually a very interesting one because she's been at the forefront of this transparency around the COVID response. And to us, it's really important because COVID-19 comes up with lots of challenges. Aside the health challenge, you look at the economic challenge. So we had lots of people who have lost their jobs. You saw the survey by the National Bureau of Statistics late last year, some point middle August thereabout last year, which showed 1 in 2 Nigerians is either unemployed or underemployed. That's a problem on its own. So in responding to these issues, this thing has effects on the society. What would expect the government to do is to really be transparent, 1, 2, to carry actors along, state actors, non-state actors, the media, faith-based organizations, community-based organizations, in responding to this crisis. Fine, we have regulations that have been signed, we have policies that have been taken, of course, for the best interest of Nigerians, but these things should be adhered to and followed through to the latter. We shouldn't have different yards for the rich and different for the poor, where we have different policies the rich follow and the poor don't follow. And we should also ensure healthcare is actually available for all, and whatever palliative or whatever response we are giving, it should really be transparent so that citizens can actually benefit and will come out from this stronger.
Okay.
Thank you so much. We've been talking with Samuel Asimi, Program Officer, Anti-Corruption with Transparency International Nigeria, Civil Society Legislative Advocacy Center, CISLAC, based right here in Abuja, Nigeria's capital city. Samuel, thank you for making out time to be with us. As we continue to examine this report, we hope that when we do call again, you will oblige us with your presence.
Thank you very much.
All right, the conversation continues in just a moment, and when we come back, of course, Adeswa's favorite segment will be up.
Welcome back to the conversation, and it's about that time where I take you through topics or issues that have made it to the top of the trend on social media, especially Twitter. My favorite segment of the program, it's the What's Trending on Social Media segment. And now, so the issue, it's been roughly over 3 months that the hashtag Lekki Massacre trended on social media when peaceful protesters at the Lekki toll gates were reportedly shot dead, some by men of the Nigerian army. And when that happened, the Nigerian army you know what, months after that, Nigerians have kept calling because the Nigerian army has said that they weren't responsible. So there were lots of discrepancies. Who ordered the shooting? You know, who sent the men? Where were the men from? And Nigerians have repeatedly called for, you know, justice for these people. And today, the Lekki massacre has made its way to the top of the trend table again. And, you know, Nigerians are starting to express their opinion on the incident, you know, still calling for action as regards the Lekki Tollgate massacre that happened on the 20th of October 2020. So I'm going to take a few tweets to that regard. The first one is from FS_Yusuf_. Hashtag Lekki massacre happened on my birthday. It ruined my night completely for me. It's a tragedy I will remember all the days of my life. This is why I'm very particular about seeing justice served for the inhumanity against young Nigerians simply asking for a better life. Now, Ikena Ugumba says it's not like we needed Reddington Hospital to testify to confirm that the Lekki massacre happened. We still demand to know who ordered the shooting. We need justice. Now, this person, there's a picture, you know, that says if the sadness in this picture doesn't pierce your heart, you're as dead-hearted as the person that ordered the hashtag Lekki massacre. And then reaction to that, at Worldwide MKT says, the government will still deny that they shot at Lekki massacre. Very heartbreaking. Leaders without conscience. And then the last one is by at Jag Ganiyu. It says, stay away from anyone who says the Lekki massacre didn't happen. I would like to hear your thoughts on this. I don't think I've ever, you know, heard you talk about, you know, the Lekki massacre, because there are quite a number of people who said it didn't happen. I have had a conversation with people who said it didn't happen, people who said it was fake, people who said it was, you know, altered just to make government look bad. You know, what is your take on that?
We won't know the truth until the departure of this administration. So I would implore Nigerians to be patient. Not far from now, the truth will come out. If there's anything this government has proven that it's capable of doing, is being able to try to shift the focus from any subject of criticism as it relates to their administration or the way they have administered policies. And CNN did a special report. They said they were going to ban CNN, sanction CNN, and CNN has categorically stood by that report and said, look, we've done our due diligence, we stand by our report and our story, you bring your facts to contradict what we said. And up till now, we haven't seen any contradiction on the part of the Nigerian government. So it is something that has been existent, not just in Nigeria, but across Africa. I mean, after the elections in Uganda, Museveni told the opposition that if you're claiming that the elections were not free and fair, bring evidence. But he at the same time, he made sure that those who would be able to bring evidence were under house arrest. So, you know, it's something that I was told as a child, do as I say, but don't do as I do. So for now, Nigerians should be patient. Posterity will judge.
Posterity will judge. I think I like that. I'll use that as a closing statement. Nigerians, be patient. Posterity will judge. Thank you so much for being a part of the conversation. It's always fun having to do this with you and with you guys. Thank you again. Do not forget to follow us across all social media platforms. It's TOS TV Network on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And do subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. It's TOS TV Network. And also check out our website for stories across entertainment, lifestyle, politics, development across Africa. It's www.tostvnetwork.com. I am Adesiwa Osui.
And I am Kamian John. Farewell.